Crazy Viking Studios and Adult Swim Games want to know if you're a bad enough dude to wield Viking steel.
Rise, warrior.
Crazy Viking Studios, through good old Adult Swim Games, released their ode to hyper-masculine Vikings and the games that made them rock earlier this September on the PC. The massacre game Volgarr The Viking really is that hard, and because of that I only got to play the first few levels because I'm just not that Viking enough. So let's take a quick look. There's an enormously powerful dragon all the way to the right. Viking god Odin is too busy to take care of it, sends in Volgarr the Viking to take care of him. Okay, good story, moving on. The game prides itself on being old school in a number of ways, from the design of the manual made to look up like an old Genesis game, which by the way is a terrific nice touch, the very Conan the Barbarian look and tone of the game, which back in the 80s and 90s was very popular, and especially the game design to resemble classics like Rastan and Ghosts and Goblins. There are even winking homages in Volgarr the Viking that are lifted directly from Rastan. You see, in Ghosts and Goblins, part of the idea is that you had to play through the levels multiple times to get past the levels through trial and error, use of very quick reflexes, and it got a bit easier with memorization with at times very specific things that you had to do, such as weapons you had to pick up or enemies that you had to specifically time to get right. Ghosts and Goblins is most of the time a brutally difficult game. The same kind of philosophy with platforming is true for Volgarr the Viking. Through trial and error, the player learns all the little quirks of the level, so after they play it again, they can breeze through it like it was second nature. The game invites you to outsmart its own difficult design by using the spears and everything that you have to your advantage. For example, say there's an area ahead with a spider that always lunges at you and you get hit automatically when you just run after it. Knowing where the enemy is beforehand, you can throw your spear at that place and suddenly that spider isn't a problem anymore. Another part where you're trying to reach a platform without getting hit, another well-placed spear will be the perfect remedy for that. Throughout the level there are power-ups such as a helmet, more powerful spears, and even an awesome flaming sword. You can get hit once with the flaming sword or helmet. You can get hit again with the upgraded spears, but if you just have your regular sword, it's back to the very beginning of the stage. The stages themselves can be very long with all the quick traps and enemies in your way, so you'll end up going back to these points several times before you finally get through. It's the kind of game that rewards patience and helps you build focus through tense situations. Just like Ghosts and Goblins, this game makes you work for your Viking honor, and when you finally earn it, you really earn it, and you're feeling pretty freaking metal about it. The big key thing with the game here is that while it does offer a very difficult and trying challenge, it offers a completely fair challenge to the player. When you screw up at it, it's your fault, not the game's. Next time you go through the part, you'll know to do it better, then the level will bow towards your will. The game is designed around a 2-button control scheme. A jumps and B uses weapons. Using down and jump, you could do a rolling maneuver, and just hitting A does a regular jump with mechanics similar to the Castlevania games. You cannot maneuver while you're in the air, and the game is designed around this style of jumping. You can also do a double jump for the spinning sword attack, which is very useful for some of the enemies. One of the problems I encountered early on was attacking. You see, in order to swing your sword, you just hit A while moving or just standing still, but in order to throw your spear, you hit up and A at the same time. The default controller scheme feels like it was made up to be condensed to work with a 2-button controller. And because several moves are condensed within this 2-button controller scheme, I ended up second guessing which button did what. And in the heat of the moment when you're trying to second guess which controls do what, it could be a real deal breaker for the game, making it harder than it needs to be. Thankfully, you aren't just limited to using this default scheme, as you can go into the options menu and add the 3rd button to designate throwing your spears. This may seem like a small detail, but for me it was a lifesaver, so I can always rely on the 3rd button to throw the spears as opposed to having to second guess. I first played this game for 3 hours just trying to get through the first stage with the default controller scheme and a controller. But with this custom method, I was able to blow through the level in one time without dying once. Thank you, Crazy Viking. The game also doesn't have standard saving features. If you beat an area and then shut off the game, you can't turn the game back on and go back to the area. Just like in any old school game, you have to start from the very beginning of the game and go back to the part where you left off. However, the manual does state that there is a cheat warp area early on where you can warp in between levels that you've beaten in the past. However, there is an asterisk. If you do this, you'll get the worst ending in the game. To get the full good ending, you'll have to beat it all in one sitting, so it's definitely going to take some veterans quite a while to get through the entire game. The game also has a third best ending, and I can only imagine the kind of ridiculous gaming feats you'd have to achieve in order to get it. Now where is this warp zone in the game? Why, it's easy. All you have to do is... Oh man, glad I told you that. Saved a few headaches if I didn't mention that in detail. The presentation here is passable. While a lot of the animation here is really nice, not everything has mind-blowing detail to it, especially some of the bland backgrounds. However, the world and the characters are charming enough with some nice imagination to a lot of the enemy designs. And you attack his weak point for massive damage. Probably the most rewarding aspect to me is when you destroy your enemies, or they destroy you and you or them burst into guts. The sound design here is really solid. The music, while nothing insanely memorable, sets the right tone for the game, and the sound effects are incredibly satisfying. Moments like taking out a bunch of enemies in a row, making your own custom spear shish kebab, and even when dying, while frustrating, it's still pretty cool to watch and listen. The game also has a really nice sense of humor from, say, said giant enemy crab I mentioned earlier, and the achievements give winking nods to everything from Commando to He-Man, and hopefully later in the game there are more nice touches to be found like this. If, you know, I can, make it. Volgarr the Viking will probably alienate people who aren't looking for something this challenging. I can see people being too frustrated and not dedicating the time to really learning the tricks of the game. We're not all 10 years old with endless time on our hands, but for those up to the challenge for a game that would get nodding approvals from the likes of Simon Belmont, Rastan, and Sir Arthur, I'd full-heartedly recommend it. The game just gets so many things right with its level design, control, sense of humor, and overall completely fair difficulty. If at first you're playing it and having trouble with the controls, I cannot stress enough how much that custom control thing saves this game. Volgarr the Viking very much deserves a place in video game Viking legend. Go ahead and give it a try. It'll put some hair in your chest.